So, good evening. Welcome to everyone to the Diamonds in Dust uh, session, where we would be having interaction with Mr. Saurabh Mukherjee, fund manager from Marcellus Investment Managers. So, he would be sharing his view and perspective on investments in India and through the PMS route, which they offer. A little about Saurabh for those of you who may not be knowing him. Saurabh Mukherjee is a CFA and the Chief Investment Officer at Marcellus Investment Managers. Formerly, he was a CEO of Ambit Capital, and where they were managing close to about $800 million. He's author of 4 best-selling books, Gurus of Chaos, published in 2014, The Unusual Billionaires, published in 2016, and Coffee Can Investing in 2018, and the new book, which is out, Diamonds in the Dust, which is published as we speak about a month ago. He was also the co-founder of Clear Capital, a London-based small-cap equity research firm, which he and his co-founders created in 2003 and eventually sold in 2008. He's an MSc in economics from London School of Economics, a member of SEBI's Asset Management Advisory Committee. Before I hand it over to you, Saurabh, as you are conversing and speaking to us about your style of investment, there is a lot of ambiguity and doubt with a couple of our investors who are new to PMS, especially I would say the 3 C's, which is concentration, or a PMS is very concentrated, and the next is there's a lot of churn which happens in a PMS, and finally the cost. Right. So, if you could, in your course of your conversation, if you could even touch upon this, it'll
be happy to. So, do you want me to take people through the crux of the book, or
yes,
I don't take them through the crux of the book so that they stay curious and they buy the book and they read the book? I mean, I can do either. So I can say, go away, read the book, and then we'll do a multiple choice test on the book. We could do that as well. Or we'll try to give you a primer. So I won't give the whole book away because it sort of defeats the purpose of writing it. I'll give you the crux of what's in the book, and in this so doing, I'll help you understand these 3 points that Vimal raised, right? So hopefully you can see this, right? So it was launched actually last week, but through the grace of God, it's already become a bestseller. So 3 of us wrote it. I actually don't do much other than sit around and read books most of the time. The hard work is done by people much brighter than me, people like Rakshit and Salil. So Rakshit manages our flagship portfolio, Consistent Compounders. Salil manages our largest advisory portfolios. They have distinguished backgrounds. And what we do day in, day out, and we do this for 8,000 families across 10,000 crores now, more than 10,000 crores, is we do 3 simple things. We look for clean companies, because 80% of listed companies are naughty companies. They do naughty things with their money. The first 120 pages of this book will tell you how naughty they are. I'll give you a sense as well how quickly your wealth could disappear in India. Right? And that's what happens to most Indians who step into the stock market without understanding how naughty promoters are. So we look for clean promoters who are not stealing money. Secondly, we look for rational promoters who are in business to run a business where the return on capital is above the cost of capital, rather than looking for promoters who are in business for social prestige, for empire building, for creating jobs for their children and so on. And thirdly, most importantly, we look for promoters who are dominant, who are basically monopolists, right? Never ever invest in India, folks, in a business which is into monopoly. So clean, rational, and monopolistic, that's what we do. That's how we manage money for 8,000 families. Now, why do we write about this? What's the point of writing? It takes 2 years of hard work to write one of these books, right? And whilst the books sell extremely well, and our publisher Penguin makes millions of dollars, I'm not so sure how many people read it. Between you and me, people in India find it hard to read anything longer than a WhatsApp message, right? So why do we still write these books? What's the point of writing? The reason for writing is our country is one of the hardest stock markets in the world to make a lot of money. So the good news is that over the last 10 years, the Indian stock market has created $1 trillion of wealth, right? That's very good news, right? $1 trillion of wealth in a country where GDP is 3 trillion is an incredible achievement. But the remarkable thing is, this $1 trillion of wealth has come from 16 companies. 16 companies have driven 80% of the compounding of the market in the last 10 years. And reason for that is we are an incredibly concentrated country. Now we're a monopolized country. Just 10 Indian companies account for 90% of the nation's profits. Right? 10 companies account for 90% of the nation's profits, and a dozen and a half companies basically drive the stock market's compounding. So, the answer to the concentration question is, honestly, if you don't want to be concentrated, don't bother with the stock market. You're not going to make money. This is not a land of milk and honey. This is a country where around a dozen families control the country. They make all the money, both in terms of profits, and they make the money in the stock market. Their stocks go up. If you're not going to have a concentrated portfolio around these dozen and a half families, don't bother with the stock market. Keep buying flats, keep buying bars of gold, and keep doing fixed deposits. And you know the consequences that will accrue from that, right? So the challenge in our country is, whilst there are 6,000 companies listed, because the wealth concentration, the profit concentration is so intense, right? Half the companies that were listed in the BSE 500 a decade ago are now faded to obscurity. Nobody knows their names anymore. They're sort of there, but they're half dead, right? Why? They couldn't compound. They didn't know how to run their businesses, or they stole money, or a mixture of the two. In fact, if you expect, right, when you expect with the PMS, when you invest with the PMS, I presume you expect a return of at least 15%. Well, if that was your expectation, 85% of the BSE 500 would have failed to deliver on your 15% expectation over the last decade. And similarly, 70% of the Nifty 50, right, couldn't generate a return on capital above cost of capital. So the vast majority of the stock market, the vast majority of the household names that you are familiar with, they actually don't make any money, both at the financial level, i.e. the company doesn't make cash flow, and they don't generate wealth for Vimal or for Sanjeet or for Saurabh, right? The result is the stock market makes a lot of money, but it's like finding needles in a haystack, or to use the operative metaphor of the moment, it's like finding diamonds in the dust. We live in the world's most polarized stock market, and hence you need to have a concentrated portfolio. If you don't want to have one, don't bother with the stock market. There are other ways to compound your wealth in the country. Right now, given that the stock market creates so much wealth, but it is polarized, you and I need a certain technique to find diamonds in the dust. You and I need a certain technique to find needles in the haystack. What is that technique? So step one is avoid naughty companies. Why should you avoid naughty companies? Right? Because if you invest in naughty companies, right, your wealth will evaporate very quickly, right? So we've given you 3 examples here. These are not even large companies. These are not even large companies, but the amount of money they eviscerated, the amount of wealth that disappeared is unbelievable. So if you look at Dewan Housing Finance, right, at its peak market cap was 20,000 crores. It's worth nothing today. So $3 billion nearly wiped out. Focus then on the middle block on Dewan Housing Finance, right? The forensic audit that was done on Dewan Housing by Grant Thornton showed that more than $2 billion disappeared. Right? You and I know where it disappeared. I don't need to comment on that, right? And this is not even a major company, right? This is not even a major Nifty company. $2 billion smoked out. Deccan Chronicle, right? Look at Deccan Chronicle. It's a thoda sa purana story hai, but if you look at the middle box on Deccan Chronicle, right? From nowhere, they swung from being a profitable company to a massive loss. And out of nowhere, a debt-free balance sheet suddenly ended up having 4,000 crores of debt, right? In simple English, close to $1 billion of naughtiness happened here, right? Cox and Kings, travel agent, tours and travel company, right? From a positive net worth of nearly 5,000 crores in March 19, within a year, they swung to a negative net worth of 7,000 crores. That's a 12,000 crore swing. $1.8 billion, 12,000 crores is vaporized, right? And you and I can guess where that went, right? So the first 150 pages of the book explain to you how this is done. And we've deliberately used companies which are not a Satyam or an ILFS. Because a lot of people think he's Satyam or ILFS hi hua hai, but the reality is different. Every day, companies in the stock market are stealing your money. And if you don't have a fund manager who knows how to do forensic accounting, large sums of money are being taken out of your life savings. Right now, the reason this is such a tragic thing is the most likely victim of these squeezes is not, the large family offices of, say, Mukesh Ambani Sahab or Narayan Murthy Sahab or, say, the Murugappa Group. The large family offices are not going to get stuck. Who will get stuck? People like you, millions of people like you are the targets of these people. They are coming after you. They're coming after my family, my relatives, my friends, your family, your relatives. And I'm giving you an example of that, right? One of the companies with the most hopeless accounting, right? A company that whose accounting we used to laugh at through 2013, 14. The company, after the fraud became public, the share price plunged, Diwan Housing. See how the share price plunges. And guess who buys the shares? The retail investor buys the shares. The people near my house, my neighbors, they buy the shares. Why do they buy the shares? Because they're told by some naughty person, buy Diwan Housing, you will make money. And the human mind can't resist that. People believe that, yes, there are irregularities in Diwan Housing, but boss, it's already been made public, no? And kitna girega stock, kitna girega. So look how as the company stock price plummets on the back of naughtiness in accounts, which Dan Thornton has discovered in great detail subsequently, the retail shareholding zips up. It's so tragic. And this happens in stock after stock. You are going to be targeted, right? So the strata of Indian society where net worth or financial wealth is between, say, 2 crores to 100 crores. This is the strata of Indian society most vulnerable. If you are worth several hundred crores, the corporate community is not going to mess with you. If you live in the slums, they're not going to mess with you. But if you're in that 2 crores to 100 crores strata, you're a soft target because you have enough money to make it worth squeezing you, but you don't have enough for you to be able to use political pressure to go after these people, right? So the first thing to do in India is to use a forensic accounting checklist. We have given you our forensic accounting checklist, which we have built after 10 years of hard work. We've given you our forensic accounting checklist in pages 44 and 45 of Diamonds in the Dust. Right? We've laid it out for you as to how we check fraud on the P&L, on the cash flow statement, on the balance sheet, and using some other qualitative metrics on the company. Right? So the first layer of a fund manager's job. If you apply these forensic accounting techniques, basically something like majority of the Indian stock market is taken out of the table, of the picture, right? Second thing then, right? The company is clean, but hey, will it still make you money? No, it won't unless there is a barrier to entry, unless there is a franchise, unless the promoter has built a business which the rivals find impossible to compete with. So if you look at the left-hand side, we'll follow the slide from left to right. The first thing we look for in a company, and there's a whole chapter on this in Diamonds in the Dust, is we're looking for companies where the pricing power is immense, right? And the best way to understand pricing power, a lot of people think that the way to understand pricing power is input costs will rise, the company will hike prices and still not lose market share. That's not the best way to think about pricing. The best way to think about pricing is a new competitor comes in. The company's new competitor offers the same product 1/3 cheaper. The new competitor offers the same product 1/3 cheaper. We don't want our investee company to lose any profit share or market share, right? That's the real test, right? So I'll give you the simple example to understand this. So Nestle has 97% of the baby milk powder market in India, right? The market for children aged 0 to 2, Nestle has 97% market share. Now tomorrow, suppose say, Baba Ramdev or Patanjali launched discount baby milk powder at say 25-30% cheaper. Do you reckon lots of people in your and my social circle will say, let me now feed my child discount milk powder? And I don't think so. I don't think launching cheap milk powder is going to dent Nestle's market share. Similarly, let's do it in a B2B context. Divi's Lab in Hyderabad. Divi's Lab supplies 75% of the world's naproxen. Naproxen is the main active ingredient inside painkillers. Divi's is the global giant, 75% global market share. Now, Divi's supplies, say, GSK, GlaxoSmithKline. If tomorrow I went to GlaxoSmithKline and said, look, sir, I will give you naproxen 30% cheaper than Murli Divi. right? Or say I went, or Cipla went, or Lupin went. Do you think GlaxoSmithKline will care? GlaxoSmithKline will say, "No, boss, I don't need your cheap naproxen." They'll give me three reasons. Firstly, they'll say, if I put your naproxen in my painkiller, I'll have to go to the American regulator and the British regulator one more time, apply once again with the new formulation, because your naproxen will be quite.
First is when a decision has already been taken by Honorable Appellate Panel of IIITIA. What is holding?
Yeah, thank you. So step one, Glaxo will say we can't take your naproxen because if we change the formulation, your naproxen rather than Divi's, we have to go to the regulator. It's a 2-year process to get drug approval. Secondly, they'll say, suppose we get drug approval. If you charge us 30% less for naproxen, that's the total scheme of the cost of the drug. It's barely 1%, 2% of the cost of the drug. The API, the active ingredient cost is barely 1 or 2%. I don't care, the customer won't care. Anyway, I'm going to pass on the cost to the customer. I'm not focused on price. And the third reason, my offering cheap naproxen to Glaxo will not allow me to dislodge Murli Divi is, Glaxo will say we worked with Murli Divi for 30 years. We know that he supplies a credible, high quality product. Thank you very much. We don't want your cheap API. Right. So the first thing that a smart fund manager should look for after accounting cleanliness is look for companies for whom price doesn't make a difference. Even if somebody offered the product 30% cheaper, they would still retain the entire profit share and market share. Now, why do we want this high pricing market share? So high pricing power. We want high pricing power because high pricing power allows a company to generate lots of cash. Right. So the second thing to look for is, can the promoter deploy the cash intelligently, right? So clean promoter, high pricing power. Next, does the promoter have a track record of deploying the cash intelligently and growing the business further and faster in the next few years, right? So the ability to go through the ups and downs of the business cycle while steadily growing the business at 20-25% by redeploying surplus cash is the sign of a skillful promoter. So you not just need Murli Divi style pricing power or Nestle style pricing power, you also need the intelligence of Murli Divi to say, I'm making a lot of money from painkillers. Now let me reinvest. Let me reinvest the painkiller profits. Let me reinvest the painkiller profits in cracking more drugs. So today, after 20 years of hard work, out of the world's top 20 drugs, the 20 most popular drugs in the world, in 10 of them, Divi's lab is the world's largest producer of the active ingredient. Right? Why? Because Murli Divi has reinvested surplus cash flows again and again. And the third thing is, not only do you want high pricing power and year after year reinvestment of surplus cash, you want it to be an institution. You don't want it to be a Lala Ki Dukan. You don't want it to be a setup where the promoter G says jump and everybody says how high. Right? So how can you look for that? We've given you a framework for that as well, right? In the book, we've given you a framework for that. Our analysts also use this framework. It's called the institutional building or the longevity framework, right? So there's a whole chapter in the book on this aspect. How do you look for companies where it's not Lalaji ki dukan, it's not a promoter ka single one-man show, it's actually an institution. Now, if you do all of this, right, just to be clear, step one, you're making sure the accounting is clean. You're using forensic accounting techniques. Step two, after clean accounting, you're looking for high pricing power. Reinvestment of surplus cash and institution building. Why is this important? If you can get it right, you get the blue line. If you don't get it right, you do standard Desi investing, Nifty, mutual funds, 5 PMSs, 3 AIFs, you get the red line. Right? The blue line is actually Asian Paints, but Pidilite is very similar, Titan is very similar, HDFC Bank is very similar, Divi's Lab is very similar. So there are two specific things that you get if you do our style of investing, consistent compounding. Obviously, you get the blue line, which is close to 30% CAGR rather than the Nifty compounding, which is 14% CAGR. Right? Everybody understands that 30% CAGR is better than 14% CAGR. But there's something else you also get. And the histograms on the right-hand side show you that. Right? If you compare the histograms, there are two histograms. The Asian Paints histogram is the top one, consistent compounder. And the Nifty histogram is the bottom one. right? And if you compare the two histograms, you notice, three very interesting things emerge, right? And I love these histograms because they tell you about so much about investing in a visual way. So the first thing, I hope everybody can see it. Folks, you can see this histogram, right?
Yes, sir, we can.
So the first thing is, right, with the Nifty, with our broader benchmark, and whether you invest in mutual funds or Nifty, right? Mutual funds and Nifty are very similar, right? Large cap mutual funds and Nifty are very similar. In around 40% of the years, you end up with negative returns, right? And around 60-65% of the year with Nifty, you end up with positive returns. However, with Asian Paints, right, in only 1 year out of 20, do you have negative returns. In every other year, you made money, right? So the chances of losing money with a high quality compounder is actually quite low, right? So there aren't that many companies like this. This, as I said earlier on, there's 15 such companies in the country who basically drive the country's profits and the country's compounding now. But the chances of losing money with this are low. It's not impossible. You can still lose money. This is stocks. This is not bonds. You can still lose money, but the chances of doing so are quite low. The distribution has a positive skew and statistical parlance. Even when you focus on the positive side of it, right, what you notice is not only does it have a positive skew, whereas for Nifty, the highest tower is the 10 to 20% return tower. For Nifty, the most likely outcome is 10 to 20%, right? For the sorts of stocks we invest in, the most likely outcome is returns above 30%, right? And in the book, we have given you similar histograms for Pidilite, for Asian Paints, for HDFC Bank, for Divi's Lab. You'll notice the same pattern. That not only is there a positive skew, even in the positive world, even in the right-hand side world, the highest tower, the most likely outcome is returns above 30%. Why returns above 30%? Because the business itself is growing at 25%. Why is the business growing at 25%? Because the promoter is reinvesting heavy surpluses back into the business. Where does he get the heavy surpluses from? Because he has very high return on capital. Where does he get the high return on capital from? Because it is impossible for the competition to compete with him, right? That's how the logic works, right? So our job for the 8,000 families we look after is to do consistent compounding, right? Over the last 3 years, we've compounded around 27%, right? And the market in India over long periods of time gives you 13-14%, right? Now, if I just one second, I'll have to think, yeah, otherwise it can't move forward. Yeah. I'm not really good at this, so just bear with me as I figure out how to get rid of this stuff. Undo.
Is there an eraser which you can use function to
but I don't know. Okay, yeah, this is my God, you're just genius, woman. Your skills on Zoom are far better than mine. Yeah, so now then comes the question, right? A lot of people say, kab ghusna hai market mein, when should we enter, boss? Sasta hai market mein, sasta jab hoga ghusenge, mehenga jab ghusenge, right? That's the most useless time wasting thing that you could do, try to agonize about market timing. So why is timing the market the most useless activity known to mankind, right? So let's start with the Nifty, the Sensex itself. I'm not even gonna dwell on stocks first. Let's focus on the Sensex itself, right? So if you look at if you remember, right, cast your mind back to the first 90 days of 2020. Wild panic in India, right? Massive correction in the market, right? The market corrected rapidly in the first 90 days. Market fell 38% in the first 49 days of the country, or the year of 2020, right? Then I remember doing a webinar with our clients on 15th March, telling our clients, look, there's nothing to be scared about, invest. And people, use colorful language to say, you moron, how can you say nothing to worry about? Whole country is coming to a halt, right? And you're like a stupid fellow sitting in your house in Bombay saying nothing to worry about. How can you possibly say that? Then on 23rd, the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, and the market was, by that time, it was down 38%, right? And clients were kicking and screaming, khatam ho gaya, boss. Although I told them, boss, hamara portfolios, we only fell 13%, by the way. It's really interesting. We fell only 13% in this period, right? When the market fell 38%, We fell 13%, but the client was watching the market. He wasn't watching our portfolio. He was just panicking watching CNBC, right? Then this is the lockdown announcement. In the next 49 sessions, first 49 sessions down 38%. Next 49 sessions, when the whole world thought the whole country thought the world is finished, the market recouped all the losses, right? So timing the market is futile. The market will recover when you don't know. It will fall when you have no idea. Now, if timing the market is futile, how will you make money? So let's take Asian Paints. Let's just stick to one stock. If you buy Asian Paints at the year's low, suppose you're a genius, right? You're a astrologer. You know God comes to you in a dream and tells you that this is the day on which Asian Paints will be at the year's low. You do that for the last 10 years. You do that for the last 10 years. Your compounding is 29%. Now, suppose like me, you don't have such divine insight. Like me, you don't have any divine insight. And you say, I will buy Asian Paints on a random date, say 1st January every year. Over the last 10 years, you'll have compounded at 27.5%. The delta is 1.4%, not worth losing sleep about. Now, please don't try to do this with non-Marcellus stocks. If you try to do it with non-Marcellus stocks, you'll get into a lot of trouble. Right? It's like those disclaimers people give, when you're watching stuntmen on TV. Don't repeat this at your house. It's a little bit like that. So if you try this on non-Marcellus stocks, you'll end up in 7-8%, because typical Indian company, remember I told you there's only 12.5 companies like this. 90% of companies, they don't have any compounding. It's a shambles. The promoter is stealing money. Capital allocation is rubbish. It's a substandard franchise. You're not going to make money, right? So if you want to have a spread out portfolio, I'm sure Vimal can put you in touch with people who will spread out your portfolio, but then don't expect to make money in the Indian market. You can do that sort of thing in America. In India, if you want to make proper money, sensible investing, there's around 15 such franchises. And if you invest in them, timing is irrelevant. So the most futile thing in investing, and again, we've given you lots of worked examples to understand this, that the most futile thing in investing is timing the market, right? In fact, we've shown in the book, and my colleagues, I think Rakshit came up with the idea. We've shown in the book something which even blew my mind. We've shown you in the book that suppose rather than buying Asian Paints at the year's low, right? Suppose every year for the last 10 years, you bought Asian Paints at the year's high. Suppose every year for the last 10 years, you bought Asian Paints at the year's high, you still compound at 23%, right? It is absolutely mind-blowing. So every year for the last 10 years, you buy Asian Paints, not at the year's low, not at the random date, 1st January, but at the year's high, the highest share price in the year, right? You'll still get 23% compounding, right? So that's the, again, this thing, as soon as you annotate, the slide stops going forward. 1 second. Let me see if I can figure out how to move the slide forward. So if I erase all this and cancel this, yeah, hopefully it'll now move forward. Yeah, right. So what is the sum total of what we are trying to tell you both in the book and what we do for our clients, right? You've worked hard for your money, right? Whether you're running a small business, you're an executive in a senior company, you worked mighty hard for your money, I'm sure. What you are trying to do, I'm trying to do, is make sure your and my money doesn't go to chore promoters, which is the majority of them, right? That's the first thing we're trying to avoid. Even after we avoided corrupt promoters, we're then trying to make sure your and my money doesn't go to promoters who are incompetent when it comes to allocating capital and running their businesses on a day-to-day basis. Even if he's competent, we still need to do one last thing. We need to make sure he's a dominant player who has immense pricing power and practically no competition, right? So if we can find clean franchises, good capital allocation, dominant franchise, there's basically 15 odd of them in the country, you and I will get a decent return from the market. Whilst the historical track record has been 27%, I would say don't go by that. Think about more like a 20% number, right? Now the stakes are high for you and for me, right? I don't think I'm in this boat alone. I think you are, my relatives are, your relatives are. We are all in the same boat here. We're not going to make money buying flats and bars of gold and fixed deposits. If you don't, we have to come in the stock market. If you don't do this style of investing, right? Vimal gave me 3 things at the outset. He said, you want to know why don't you spread out your portfolio. Please spread out your portfolio, but then expect to see returns less than 10%, the right hand side, right? You'll be like the fellow on the right hand side. If you want to see a decent outcome, consistently 20% compounding, and you want to be like the man on the left hand side, right? Follow this method, right? I'm not trying to make a fast buck. Buy the book for 400 rupees. You can do this yourself. You have to apply yourself to read the book, but we put everything, our life's learning is in the book. Apply this yourself and get a healthy outcome from the market. I don't think you or I have a choice. We have to come into the Indian equity market. Question is, how do we come into the equity market? Most people you and I know are going to focus on the right hand side stuff, right? The usual regular Indian investing, mutual funds, some direct stock picking, some punting, some a futile attempt to time the market, and the returns will be modest. We're trying to take you to a better outcome. That really is it in terms of the knowledge in the book. There's something else I'll try to share with you. Just 1 second. As soon as I deal with this, as soon as I deal with how to get this, there's something else I'll share with you, right? You guys are busy people, right? And many of you will be saying, you know, I've got too many things on my plate. Do I really have time to read another book, right? WhatsApp message, theek hai, a blog on the internet, theek hai. Do I really have time for reading a book? So in order to give you some extra motivation, right? In order to give you some extra motivation, what we have done in the book is we've asked our guru, the man who taught us most of what we know. He's a great British investor called John Kay. He's also a fabulous author, one of the most influential economists. We've asked John to write the foreword of the book. Right. By the way, you can either ask for the book via Vimal. We'll happily send you a book. If you don't want to do that, you can buy it from this very nice man in Pune. He organizes for autographed copies, right? It'll cost you 400 rupees, but buying books, I think, is a great activity. But forget the buying. Why should you read the book, right? So John Kay, the man we have learned everything from, Sir John Kay, has written the foreword. So he said in the foreword of Diamonds and Dust, he says, no one said successful investment was easy, but this book will lead you carefully through the underlying principles. You will learn how to see through deceptive accounting. You will not learn how to time the market, but you will learn that even if you were able to do so by some prescience no one else has yet achieved, the returns from market timing are far less than the returns from effective stock picking. You learn the nature of comparative advantage and how to identify sources of competitive advantage that are sustainable. To invest well, you must understand these things. I hope this book will encourage many people to take control of their own wealth management. I'll stop there, Vimal, otherwise people will get bored with my droning voice.
So Saurabh, from the perspective you did share about concentration, right? So
cost and what was the other one? Cost and
churn.
So look, we churn very little. So our portfolio has 14 stocks. In a given year, we buy one stock and we sell one stock. Why do we churn so little? Part of the reason is there's only half a dozen such franchises in the country. Not that there is a huge amount of choice for us. There are very few companies in India who operate at this level of quality and ethics and compounding. So in a given year, we'll sell one stock and buy one stock. Typically, the exits will come because either the promoter started doing some naughty stuff, or he's not planning for his succession. He believes he's immortal, and if we see signs of delusion on that front, right? We spend a lot of time talking to these promoters. So every 6 months, pre-COVID, we used to go and meet them. Now we do Zooms. And we have these difficult conversations about, are you training your son or your daughter? If he says, no, my son or daughter, he was a bacha, he's only 45, right? That's a sign of delusion. If he says, I'm only 67, that's a sign of delusion. That's when we start checking out, right? So first is corruption, second is poor succession planning, and the third thing we exit for is if he starts allocating capital in a suboptimal way. Because he's a monopolist, he will generate lots of free cash flow. But if he starts misallocating it, if he starts allocating the capital in a suboptimal way, in a stupid way, we will sell the stock. So you get Out of 14 stocks, 1 stock gets sold, 1 stock gets purchased. On the stock that is sold, you'll typically incur long-term capital gains tax, which is 10%. But that's it. You'll have far higher churn in a mutual fund. I guarantee you, a mutual fund in India will give you 25-30% churn. I sit on the regulatory committee for both PMS and mutual funds. So believe me when I tell you that the mutual funds have far higher churn than our PMS has. Then you asked about cost. We manage money at zero fixed fees. Up to 8% returns, we don't charge you anything at all. There's zero fees up to 8% return. The way we earn our money is if we can generate returns for you in excess of 8%, if we can generate returns for you in excess of 8%, on that excess above 8, we take 1/5 of that, right? So just to do a simple example, suppose our returns are 15%. 15 minus 8 is 7. 1/5 of 7 is 1.4. So at the on your anniversary date with us, your fees will be 1.4. Your returns will be 15 minus 1.4, which is 13.6. Right? That's the way the performance fee sharing works. Now, what's happened is, as I showed you, typical returns have been around 27%. Right? Our returns have typically been around the 27% mark over the last 3 years, which means that 27 minus 8 is 19. 1/5 of 19 is nearly 1/5 of 19 is nearly 3% or more than 3%, 3.5%, right? So the performance fees have ended up being 3.5%. As you can understand, 2 years ago, a lot of clients said that's a lot of money. So what we give people a choice is, if you don't want to do performance fee sharing with us, you can pay a fixed fee. So you can pay a fixed fee of 2%, or there's no fixed fees. You can work on a zero fixed fee basis, no fees up to 8%. And on the returns above 8, we'll take 1/5. So the choice is yours. You can work on a 2% fixed fee or a performance fee, and you don't have to, you can change your mind later. You can start with one and then pivot to the other. As you can imagine, most people, by the time they come to us, they've been cleaned out by other fund managers. So when they come to us, they typically start with zero fixed fee. And 2 years later, within the second anniversary, 80% shift to the 2% fixed fee. That's fine. We all live and learn. There's no sin in that. So I would say, if you're concerned about cost, don't pay us anything at all. I don't want a fixed fee from you. I know you will get good returns and I will make good money operating on a zero fixed fee basis.
Saurabh, if you can throw some light on that, that note which I read in April that you had, it was very, very compelling. I thought, if you could share from the perspective of at what optimal point it becomes, good concentration, but your returns, your risk comes down to a level, but your returns also comes down considerably when you over diversify. And can you share some light on that?
Sure. Let me just open the note 1 second so that we can. So this is the science behind portfolio concentration, right? This is the one we're talking about. So yeah, so I'll show you. So thanks for raising that. 1 second, let me just beam it up so that everybody else. By the way, folks, all our research is given away free on our website. All our webinars is on our website. Every month we do webinar with our clients and the whole world can watch it. You can go and watch the entire history of our webinars. So first off, right, what does the science say? What science says, or the finance theory from great American economists says, is that whilst your risk does drop with most stocks in the portfolio, right? This point in the portfolio, right? Whilst your risk does drop with most stocks in your portfolio, this point is 14, 15 stocks. So after the 14th stock, adding another 3 stocks or 5 stocks doesn't meaningfully lower your risk. And that's not Saurabh Mukherjee blabbing this. This is great American economists who have crunched numbers for 50 years have found that after the 14th stock, anyway, your risk doesn't drop meaningfully. So it's more psychological comfort rather than anything else. But there's another dimension to it, which I'll go into. So, right, every fund, this is a little small, so every fund, right? Every fund has a bunch of characteristics that the fund manager is looking for, right? What are we looking for? We're looking for clean promoters. We're looking for pricing power. We're looking for succession planning, right? So every fund has a bunch of characteristics. We are looking for the ones I talked to you about. Some other fund manager could be looking for cheap stocks in the mining sector with promoters who come from a certain part of India, right? So every fund manager looks for certain characteristics. Based on the characteristics, based on whatever characteristics the fund manager fancies, based on whatever characteristics the fund manager fancies, the fund manager scores, he assesses his portfolio based on that. Now, if you have a structure like this, where the scores drop in a linear factor, right? If you have a portfolio like this, where the scores drop in a linear factor, right? You sort of say that my optimal risk reward is at the 14th stock, right? This is basically our experience of India, that once you go beyond 14, 15 stocks, you're getting very little return and you're ramping up the risk, right? But there are other ways to think about India. One second, let me just go further on. Right, there are other ways to think about India, right? A lot of people think about India like this chart, right? So I gave you the preceding chart is how we think about India. A lot of people believe, a lot of people, most people, in fact, majority of people you and I know, for them, Reliance Industries, L&T, Hindalco, Tata Steel, State Bank of India, ICICI Bank are very similar to Asian Paints, HDFC Bank, Nestle, Pidilite, Titan, etc. So a lot of people don't have a scoring system which allows them to separate the men from the boys. A lot of fund managers, they believe that there are 30 stocks in India which are of great quality, right? So that fund manager's scoring system, in that fund manager's scoring system, 30 stocks are seemingly of great quality. So that fund manager has a 30 stock portfolio, right? So rather than our 15 stock portfolio, that fund manager 30 stock portfolio, if I go to that fund manager and say, boss, why do you have 30 stocks? I too have only 14 stocks. He will tell me, Saurabh, you're a moron. You have no idea that there's another 15 stocks which are of great quality, which your team hasn't spotted, right? So different people perceive the world differently. Now, our view is there are certain merits of having a very structured model, right? If you have an over-diversified portfolio, you have too many stocks, you or your fund manager won't be able to do deep research. It takes us, and we are one of the most powerful teams in the country, it takes us nearly 2 years to research a company. Is the promoter clean? Is he intelligent? Has he built a formidable franchise? If I have 30 stocks to research, I can't do it, right? Secondly, a lot of fund houses say, the reason I want 30 stocks, they don't tell you this, they tell me, the reason I want 30 stocks in the portfolio, Saurabh, is so that I can manage $10 billion. I can manage $10 billion. I'm not happy, unlike Marcellus, which only manages $1.5 billion. Other fund houses say we want to manage $10 billion. Why $1.5 billion? If you want to manage $10 billion, obviously you need lots of stocks in the portfolio, but you compromise on the research. Your understanding is weaker. The returns are lower, but hey, who cares? Because they are getting paid on assets under management. We are not getting paid on assets under management. We are getting paid on portfolio returns because we've got a profit share model. And as a result of that, we believe it makes sense for us to run concentrated portfolios of high quality companies whose promoters are clean, whose capital allocation is sensible, and whose franchises are very strong.
Great. Brilliant. Thanks, Saurabh. The request all of us, anyone has any questions, to please put it in the chat box, and we would spend some time on Q&A. I have one question from a client, Saurabh, which basically says he agrees with what you say. Why not a simple large cap or mid cap index fund versus a PMS?
Feel free to go for it. No, but as I showed you, you're going to make 11-12%. If you buy a Nifty tracker, you can buy a Nifty tracker. It's 5 bips fee, right? 5 bips fee. Buy a Nifty tracker. Your returns compounding, last 10 years compounding has been 11-12%. That's not bad, by the way. That's far better than buying a flat in Alwarpet or Sarjapur or Banjara Hills or Lower Parel, right? That's a typical Indian kind of default buy. I'm going to buy a flat. So buying a Nifty tracker is a far better thing to do than buying a flat or a bar of gold. And you can pay 5 bips fee. You'll never underperform. But it defeats the point of investing in India. The reason investing in India is powerful today is, rather than 50 companies, Nifty, when you buy a tracker, you're buying 50 companies, Nifty 50. Out of those 50 companies, 35 actually make no money. Literally, the company makes no money. If you look at the Nifty 50, open the annual report, 35 out of the Nifty 50 companies, you see the annual report, the company makes no money. There's no cash flow. Not in the last 1 year, not in the last 3 years, not in the last 5 years, not in the last 10 years, not in the last 15 years. I don't know about you. I'm not going to invest my money in a company which doesn't generate cash flow in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 years. So if you want to have a check, go and have a look. Open L&T's cash flow statement, open Hindalco's cash flow statement, open Tata Steel's cash flow statement. Feel free, have a look. You'll see 70% of the Nifty companies, there is no free cash flow generation. Right? That's the sad part. Right? Now, why is there no free cash flow generation is a subject. I can get into that. But it's a different subject. But by all means, rather than, if you ask me between buying flats and gold or buying a tracker fund, I would say do tracker fund every time. Don't buy flats, don't buy gold, for Christ's sakes. Right? My father's generation has been ruined by that sort of investing, buying flats and gold and bloody insurance policies and fixed deposits. They worked so hard all their lives, and they have nothing to show for it because they ended up buying flats and gold and did fixed deposits. And this winter, I'm looking to sell 3 flats. Anybody wants to buy a flat in Kolkata or Delhi, let me know. I'm a seller, as are millions of other Indians.
So, Saurabh, just to follow up on that, when you say cash flow, I mean, we normally think of profits, right? So what do you mean by cash flow?
So what is cash flow? Cash flow is the money that comes out of, profit is not the money that comes out of a business. So let's take an example. So let me take my publisher. My publisher is Penguin. So well before Penguin makes money on this book, they give me an advance so that I start writing the book. Then when I deliver the manuscript to them, they give me another slug of money. So remember, by the time I've delivered the manuscript to Penguin, they have given me 2 bouts of cash payment. They have hired editors. The editor has worked hard. They have paid the editor's salary. They have paid for their office premises. Then Penguin spend money printing the book. Then they spend money hiring trucks to take the book to the distributor near your house. Right? By the time Penguin makes money from Sanjeet or Saurabh or Vimal buying the book, by the time Penguin makes earns a revenue from our buying the book, they've already spent 1 year of cash flow, paying me, paying their editor, paying their printer, paying the truck driver. Right? So Penguin, superficially speaking, makes a profit. Say the book is 400 rupees. The cost of the book to Penguin is probably 300 rupees. So superficially speaking, Penguin's profit from the book is 100 rupees. But their cash flow from the book is a lot less than 100. Because for the bulk of the life of their engagement with me, they are bleeding cash. Now, because Penguin is a giant publishing shop, they will have, out of, they say, 1,000 books in the market. On 900 books, they would have long since paid the author. Right? So say Arundhati Roy wrote God of Small Things 20 years ago. On a book like Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, they incurred the cash burn 20 years ago. And today they're just milking the cash flow from God of Small Things. Right? So because Penguin is a giant publishing house with 1,000 titles in the market, on 900 of them, the cash burn stage is long since gone. And only on 100 books are they burning cash, like my title. Right? On balance, therefore, Penguin generates good cash flow. But if tomorrow you and I set up a publishing house, we would make no cash, because for the next 2 years, we would spend on staff salaries, author payments, printer payment, transporter payments before we saw the first light of cash. Now, it's all right to burn cash when the company is new. Even the first 12 months of Marcellus, we burned cash. What is tragic about India is you have these giant companies sitting in the Nifty. They're 100 years old. They still don't generate cash. They show profit, but they don't have cash because they are ending up paying away the money before they actually get paid the money. Right? So let's give you an example. All of you, the pre-COVID era, you would have taken domestic flights, right? The SpiceJet and Indigo and GoAir and so on. Go and look at any Indian airlines annual report. Any Indian airline, any. Right? Kingfisher's bankrupt, it doesn't matter. Any Jet Airways, Kingfisher, SpiceJet, Indigo, you will see none of them generate cash. None. Why? Because first they have to pay for the plane. Plane, they don't buy it, they rent it, but they have to pay the rental, right? Then they borrow money to run the business, so they have to pay interest to the bank. Then they hire pilots, they have to pay salaries to pilots, airline attendants, air hostesses, and so on. Then they buy the food, the plates of food you and I consume on the plane, or the chairs, the seatings. All of that is so draining for them that whatever you and I pay for the tickets doesn't make up for it. Right? Just when they think they're going to make a bit of money, a new airline enters and they cut their prices again. So airlines is a classic example. The number of people flying domestic airlines has quadrupled in the last decade. So the sector has grown plenty. The sector has quadrupled in the last decade. But no airline makes any cash flow. Not a single penny. They didn't 10 years ago. They didn't 20 years ago. And as night follows day, they won't make money 10 years hence. Why? Because there's no barrier to entry. Right? Vimal doesn't wake up in the morning and say, boss, I'll only fly SpiceJet. That's my life's dream, to fly SpiceJet. I'm not going to fly any other airline. Right? I don't think Vimal does that, or I do that. Right? Because there is no barrier to entry, every time number of passengers go up, prices come down, and the two cancel each other. Now, the most extreme manifestation of this is one of the deadliest sectors known to mankind. It's called telecom. Right? No company in the world makes any cash flow from telecom. Why don't they make money from telecom? Right? So let me give you an example. Right? First, let's do the example, and then we'll explain why this happens. So if you look at Bharti Airtel's heyday, its kind of glorious period, was 2004 to 14. In that 10-year period, the number of minutes of talk time on the network grew at 40% per annum, right? Which means over a 10-year period, the number of minutes of talk time on the network would have grown something 30-fold. How much did their profits grow up in that period? 0%, zero. 40% growth every year in talk time, profit growth, zero. Why? Because what Bharti offered, Idea offered. What Idea offered, Aircel offered. What Aircel offered, I've even forgotten the names of these companies. They all disappeared. Right? And every Indian, myself included, shopped around. We took the cheapest tariffs. And these people were ever so kind. Right? I love companies like this, where you get cheap flights, cheap telecom, right? But ultimately, those poor fellows go belly up, right? So over 10 years, volumes of business grew manifold, profits didn't, right? And obviously, it's a dud investment. Now, this happens to telecom the world over. Every telecom provider is just the same, right? I don't think you will tell me that I really love speaking on Vodafone or whatever, Idea or Reliance Jio. To you and me, they are commodities, and we play them off against each other and we slam the prices down. Once we have dusted them over, if through some brilliance they've made a little bit of money, if suppose they're really, really clever and they're on really low cost and so on, and they made a little bit of money, then comes the next layer of extortion. Next layer of extortion in telecom is called a license auction. And whatever little money the poor fellows have, the government says, give it to me, son. And whatever little cash flow they'd made through 4-5 years of hard work by cutting costs, running a really disciplined shop, the government, the UK government does it, the Russian government does it, the Chinese government does it, and our government does it. An auction is run, whatever cash they have, chalo, de do beta, de do. And shareholder, bank, lender, no money made. Right? So this is our life. Our life is to figure these illusions through. At any given point, we're a very emotional country, and at any given point in time, Indians are passionate about technology, telecom, media. There's always a fad prevalent at that point in time. We honestly couldn't care less. Most of our time is spent reading. Every year we try to write a book. We do very little buying and selling. We honestly don't have that much idea what the share prices are. Neither do we care, right? How will it help me if I looked at the share prices? What is the RBI saying? What is the Federal Reserve saying? What is the latest view on COVID? We have no idea. Neither do we care, because what makes money is the promoter should be clean. The capital allocation should be rational, intelligent, and it should be a monopoly. That's how money is made.
Thanks, Saurabh. That was brilliant. I think you broke it down so simply for all of us to understand about cash flows. I have one more question, which is Marcellus stocks, are they all large cap?
So the out of the 14 stocks, the average market cap is around 17-18 billion dollars. So in rupee terms, that's around 1 lakh crore. So the average stock will be 1 lakh crore. At the upper end, you'll have something like HDFC Bank, which is $100 billion. HDFC Bank is the largest stock in our portfolio, $100 billion. And at the other end, the smallest stock by market cap in the portfolio is Relaxo, which is $3 billion. So we don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'll be buying large cap or small cap. We apply those three tests: cleanliness, rationality on capital allocation, and dominance. So 14 stocks, the largest in terms of market cap, HDFC at $100 billion, smallest Relaxo, $3 billion, which is 20,000 crores. Typical stock is around $16-17 billion market cap, which is around 1 lakh crores.
Yeah, I got one more question, which is basically, does it mean the mutual funds are not?
I saw that question, but I've answered that partially, So, so think about it like this. Why can I get away by just investing in 14 stocks, right? Suppose I was running $10 billion. Could I invest $10 billion in 14 stocks? No, I couldn't. I'd basically be running the stock price up and down myself every day. Because we only manage $1.4 billion, we're able to invest in 14 stocks, right? Now, with 14 stocks, we make enough money, right? The middle class people, as it is, our needs aren't great. But because we charge performance fees, we make a very good living for ourselves on performance fees, right? Our cost structure is low, our costs are modest. But if I said, I want to manage $10 billion because I want the high life on Pedder Road. I want to live in a 4-bedroom flat in Pedder Road. I also want a flat in London, and one in Singapore will be nice. And my colleagues also said that we want to live the high life in Bombay. And we said we wanted to manage $10 billion, right? If we did that, we'll have to go beyond these 14 stocks, right? You cannot invest $10 billion in 14 stocks. So the mutual funds, in all fairness, their job is to manage lots and lots of assets under management. The mutual fund, you're not the main constituency they're trying to cater to. Who is the mutual fund trying to please? Are they trying to please you? No, they're not. They're trying to please their shareholders. Their shareholders are, say, HDFC Asset Management. It's a listed company. I'm a shareholder, right? I'm going to push HDFC Asset Management and say, manage more money. Christ's sakes, manage more money. So if HDFC Asset Management is going to manage more money, will they be able to invest in 14 stocks? No, they won't. They'll have to spread themselves across 60 stocks. If they spread themselves across 60 stocks, I'll be happy as a shareholder of HDFC Asset Management. But Krithivasan ji, your returns are going to get lowered. That is how the world works, right? Now, in my case, we own the company. My colleagues and I, we own Marcellus. We don't have to make somebody else happy. But HDFC Asset Management has to make shareholders like me happy. And I'm not going to be happy if they are running a couple of $1 billion. They better be running $100 billion because I need returns as a shareholder. I don't care if Krithivasanji's mutual fund portfolio is compounding or not. It's the question of understanding who's calling the shots. In our construct, you are calling the shots because we own the company, but you are our client base. If I don't cater to your needs and 8,000 families like yours, you're not going to come to me. You're going to go to somebody else. So I need to look after you. In HDFC Asset Management's case, you don't count. I also used to have HDFC mutual fund units. As a unit holder, I don't count. As a shareholder, I count because they are concerned about their share price. And then they will show shareholders like me that we are taking $1 billion from Krithivasanji, another $1 billion from Sanjeet, and we are managing tons of money, Saurabh, which means we've invested in 100 stocks. But that's all right, I'll say, as a shareholder, because I'm not, as a shareholder of HDFC Asset, I'm not bothered whether you're getting a good return or not, because I just want my interest looked after. So let's just understand there's a dichotomy of interests.
Before I go into the last question, I had a private message saying, what is the next industry in the next 10, 20 years Will EV batteries companies do well, and is there something like that?
So Vimal, right? The Mukherjee is an anglicization, right? So the British turned our names from Mukhopadhyay into Mukherjee, Chattopadhyay into Chatterjee, Gangopadhyay into Ganguly, right? So this is an anglicization. So Mukhopadhyay, which is my ancestral name, what does that mean? Mukh Upadhyay means head teacher, right? So I asked my granddad, he passed away a decade back at the age of 101. So before he passed away, I asked him, what did our ancestors do? So he said that till 800 years ago, we were teachers in the area around what is currently Allahabad, right? And then our community migrated to what is currently Bengal, right? So all Mukherjee's, Chatterjee's are very similar. We are all migrants from the area around Allahabad to Eastern India. So when we came to Eastern India, we had to find patrons, people who would, because the schools were shut, the erstwhile occupation in Eastern India was gone. So we realized there's a good living to be made by forecasting. So my ancestors realized there's lots of good money to be made by going to Vimal. Vimal, say the feudal lord in Bengal, or a minor king or a major king in Bengal, and the king is worried about will he win the next battle. So I would confidently tell you, Vimal, you will win the next battle, right? And also go and tell your opponent, sir, you will win the next battle. By definition, somebody's going to win, no? Right? Whoever wins will capture the other fellow will die. So only the winner will survive. The winner will say, my God, Saurabh, you're genius. You told me, you're the only person who told me I was going to win. You gave me so much confidence. Why don't you take this Jagir, this bit of land? And this is how my ancestors became zamindars, right? Unfortunately, with partition, we lost all of that. But the point I'm making is a whole generation of Indians from my community made a very good living through forecasting, astrology, right? Which is not really astrology, because I explained to you the business model, right? Now, this nonsense is done by fund managers. Thankfully, my community doesn't do it anymore, or at least not to my knowledge. But fund managers done this forecasting business. They will tell you things like EV is the industry of the future, or technology. That's really the way it's going to go. Green tech is what I'm looking at. Med tech or deep tech, right? Some nonsense like this will be. And if you say enough things, or if I say enough things, obviously something or the other will work out. But it's it's a waste of time. I'm not going to get into it, right? If you want forecasting, hire an astrologist. Don't ask me.
So the other question being, is the Sensex right now exaggerated? Numbers exaggerated?
How do I know? Boss, again, forecasting. Why do you care whether it's exaggerated or not? Are we investing in the Sensex? Did I say at any stage in the last 68 minutes that we are investing in the Sensex? Did I ask you to invest in the Sensex? You asked me tracker fund. I told you, if you do tracker fund, which is Sensex and Nifty, over a long period of time, you should expect to get 12-13% returns. I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows whether it's overvalued or not. If you want to invest in the Sensex, feel free to buy a tracker fund. Provided you're willing to give it 3-4 years, you should expect to see returns of 10, 11, 12%. Right? But don't go around asking for astrology. That is not investing. So investing is identifying clean promoters, running high quality businesses, compounding your and my wealth at around the 20% mark. It has got nothing to do with whether the Sensex is high or low, whether the said company stock price is high or low.
I've got one more message.
So just let me put it in a cricketing context so that people understand it, right? So Virat Kohli, as you guys know, has had a run of bad form. Right? Virat Kohli has had a run of bad form in the last couple of years. Now, do any of us know whether Virat Kohli will perform in the remainder of the India-England Test series or not? Do we have a view? Can we forecast? Right? I can't. What I know is Virat Kohli is fundamentally a high-quality batsman, and having seen high-quality batsmen like Rahul Dravid, like Sachin Tendulkar, like VVS Lakshman, like Virat Kohli, we know that provided the batsman's fundamentals are correct, i.e. his fitness regime is good, he practices well, his technique is solid, right? The equivalent of what we do in investing. Their fitness regime is solid. They're not cheaters. Their training regime is solid, i.e. their capital allocation is good, their time allocation is good, and their technique is solid. They play with a orthodox copybook technique. They will come back to their long-term average. Long-term average for Virat Kohli batting average is 52%. 52 not percent. 52 is his batting average, right? So I don't know whether Virat Kohli will do badly or well in the next 3 tests. I don't think Ravi Shastri does either. I don't think Virat Kohli himself does. What he's focused on, what Rahul Dravid focused on, and we've used Rahul Dravid as a great example of investing. Dravid's batting and investing is very similar. Is if you do the basics right, you get good outcomes. If you start flipping around and try to do forecasting, you're going to get into trouble. Go on, Vimal, you were saying.
Yeah, I think, it's more from a perspective of an existing investor who's put his money in structured products, which, again, with...
Well, you don't need me to tell you on structured products. You know exactly how they work. I don't need to comment on it. I'm sure some high quality wealth manager had sold them the structured products. All of us know why it's done. I don't think you need me to give you a view. You're very well qualified to help your client here. I don't need to opine on this.
Sure, I think I would answer. So if there's any more questions, then we could let Saurabh go. He has another session at 6:30. Anybody would like to ask? So can we call it a day?
Vimal?
Yes.
Can I have a quick?
Yes.
Can I have a quick question with Saurabh?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Saurabh. Thanks so much. I know you were referring specifically to the Indian market, but then how would a manager, not in your specific portfolio, but would look at, let's say, you spoke about cash flows and profits, etc. So then how would you look at innovative companies, say, for example, like a Netflix or a Byju in an Indian context? If one were to invest using only these 3 parameters.
Nicely put, we don't. So I'll use a cricketing analogy. So there are fund managers whose job is to go to the Maidan, say Shivaji Park in Bombay, and to spot the next Sachin Tendulkar. Right? There are fund managers, just like good cricket coaches. The fund managers who adept at going to the Maidan. Shivaji Park in Bombay is the most famous of them. And they are in the business of spotting the next Sachin Tendulkar when he's say 12 or 13, or the next Virat Kohli when he's 12 or 13. Right? And that's what they're good at. And I'm sure you can find them. They're called venture capitalists in India. Our job is not to do that. Our job is to say that I've seen Virat Kohli bat for, 13 years. Basis my knowledge of cricket, the way Virat Kohli bats, the outcomes will be more good than bad. Why? Because A, I've done my research, his fitness regime is very good. B, I've seen that technically his technique aligns with what is low risk, high productivity batting, similar to Dravid, similar to Lakshman, similar to Ricky Ponting, etc. And C, he's got the mental skill set to succeed in Test cricket year after year. So my job is to say, first, Virat, show me 10 years of your performance. Basis 10 years of performance, I will decide whether I want to invest with you for the next 10 years. I am not gonna go to Shivaji Park and spot the next Sachin Tendulkar or the next Virat Kohli. There are other fund managers, they're called venture capitalists, they can do that. We are not in that business. Right? We don't have that skill set. Our skill set is to say, we have seen that Asian Paints for 70 years, Asian Paints has been clean, it's been rational, and it's been utterly dominant. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it's impossible to compete with Asian Paints or with Divi's Lab or with Pidilite. I'm happy to compound at 20%. I'm not in this game to figure out when Byju's will make money. There are other people, there are friends of mine, happy to put you in touch with them. They are the investors who will take you towards Byju's or the next Byju and so on. The different industry, the different type of investing. I am a person who's focused on investing middle-class people's monies in low-risk, high compounding stocks. The Byju style of investing is high return, but high risk investing. We don't have that skill set.
Thanks so much, Saurabh.
Pleasure.
Can you quickly, briefly elaborate on the structured products? You made some very cryptic remarks.
Vimal will know what I meant. Everyone knows what I meant.
Sir,
I didn't-
Sir, Saurabh would not want to comment on that. We can have a comment or a discussion one-on-one. There are several structured products that would itself take a 15-20 minute discussion. From what Saurabh is saying is, what market raises money through structured products on the debt side, right? So for their NBFCs. So that's what Saurabh was commenting on. So we could have a one-on-one conversation to understand specifically about your, concerns about structured products. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So thanks, Saurabh. Thanks for your time.
Yes, Vimal. Thank you to all of you for parting with your valuable time. You've given me 75 minutes of your time. That's extremely precious. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us for this session. Hope this was informative and that you would make wise decisions when it comes to equity investing. Just as Saurabh said that, he is not in all the spaces. So if you're looking for stock tips to, punt, we again at WealthWorks nor Saurabh advocate that kind of an investing style. We would want to, create wealth consistently over a period of time. And that's what we would like all of you to embark on also. So great. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Bye.